Hi there, thank you so much for sticking around. There was a little part of me that was like, is everyone gonna leave because they're scared to talk about psychology? The stigma is that strong sometimes. And that is why our mission with Well Connected Now is to rebrand mental health and make trustworthy support more accessible. Now, to give you a little bit more background on me, all good? Okay. So to give you a little more background on me, I used to be a product marketing manager at Microsoft. And my goal was to shift tech enthusiasts' brand perception of Microsoft's consumer apps and services. So I would go around to tech meetups around the world and demo OneDrive and Bing and Outlook.com and Internet Explorer in that picture, and then try and make it look cool to people. And that's actually at a meetup where I met Greg Smith. I don't know if there's people in the room that know him, yeah. And so we just started chit-chatting for a while, and then he told me about this great group that he's a part of that sounded like it had some similar missions that WCN does. And so to give you a little more context on how I got involved in this, so I studied psychology and science, technology, and society at Stanford. I really wanted to be a therapist, and then I became president of my first organization and realized that there was an opportunity for me to potentially make a larger and more direct impact if I went into business rather than one-on-one counseling. So I started a marketing internship at a mobile payment startup called Bling Nation, which was partnered with PayPal, and that's when I really fell in love with marketing. I grew up in San Francisco, and I wanted to see what else was out there. I also wanted to understand what office politics were, because apparently that's why all my teammates at Bling had left corporate life and never looked back. But none of them could actually explain to me what office politics meant. They said I needed to realize it for myself, experience it. And wow, did I experience it. And too many of my friends, my coworkers, my mentees were struggling unnecessarily because of underwhelming roles, unsupportive managers, or overextended job searches that they felt too long for them. These frustrations started spiraling into depression and anxiety. And I know that depression and anxiety is extremely treatable. I mean, to the point that if you see a cognitive behavioral therapist, there's an 80% effectiveness rate at your symptoms improving within 10 sessions. And yet 70% of the 25 million people struggling with depression and anxiety aren't seeking treatment. Which for me just doesn't really make much sense. It's like, oh, here's your problem. Oh, there's specialists that are trained in resolving this for you and turning it around. And I realized that the reason that most people, or not enough people, know how to recognize their depression and anxiety and reach out to get help is because therapists think it's unethical to market their services. Actually, only 18% of therapists will market directly to consumers. So what do marketers do? They make things more appealing. They tell you the benefits. They make it easier for your customer journey to end up in a closed sale, right? So if there's no one doing this for therapists, then of course 70% of the people struggling don't realize that therapy can help them. So that's part of the gap that we're trying to fill, and that I tried to fill by putting on panels for Microsoft Advertising's women's group, or for coaching Microsoft's Academy of College Hires. But it really didn't feel like enough. And last year, on November 1st, 2014, I left to start Well Connected Now. Since then, we've personally matched over 175 professionals with mentors, coaches, and therapists. we've seen over 4,000 visits to our website, and we just surpassed over $1,000 in revenue. Now, a huge part of our conversations are not necessarily, matching clients to therapists, but one of our big goals here is to help people before it spirals to that point, right? And so the people that are looking for mentors, the people that are looking for coaches, are the people that are dissatisfied in their roles and looking for some help to get out of there. So now I'm gonna run through essentially the main takeaways from the conversations that I've had with our clients, with past mentors of mine and mentees that I've tried to pass those messages on to. So first I'll run through the real ups and downs of job searching. I'll offer some networking tips that you can take or leave, as well as some interviewing advice. And then I'd also like to leave some time for an open mic where people can share things that maybe have not yet been addressed otherwise. I want us to be able to have that discussion about the tougher side of job searching. So one of the first things that I've realized is that the job search is really 80% mental and 20% action. And I think that recognizing that can help more people allow themselves to be concerned about what their next role is going to be. Now, there is much more to the job search than just writing your applications or cleaning up your resume or sending out those cover letters or putting yourself out there. A lot of it is also considering how you're going to present yourself, how you're going to play this game that is by nature one that is all about performing and then having that performance assessed. Of course, we're going to be concerned about how we're going to be perceived. We're going to be concerned on how they're going to judge us. Because to be fair, that is what this is, right? You're sending out your resume, someone's appraising it. And so what this means is that this is a vulnerable time for us, and this also means that this will trigger our insecurities. Now, for each person, that will be different because all of us have different things we're concerned about. Now, I've had clients be concerned about how high-pitched their tone is. They get extremely insecure on phone interviews. To if they struggle with their body image, they're worried about how they're going to look. If they have trouble making friends, they're worried about whether they'll belong. Maybe they're worried about whether they'll think they're stupid, whether they'll think that their background isn't strong enough. And I've seen this come up also when I've interviewed candidates, is that you'll see as the person is going over their background, kind of what are the vulnerable areas for them. And I think knowing that that's gonna come up can help you address it better. The other part is, it's difficult when people always complain about how hard it is to job search when you're working. But it's also incredibly hard to job search when you're not working. Because let's extend that 80%, 20% ratio to hours of the day. So if you're spending, let's say, 20 hours a week, if you're working full-time, and let's be honest, it's at least a part-time job, right? There's enough to it. So 80% of 20 hours, right, 16 hours of concerns and kind of, chewing over what these opportunities might mean for you or preparing for the interviews. But if you're working on this full-time, so 80% of 40 hours is 32 hours. Now, think about what that does for your psyche. If you're spending 16 hours of the week and or 32 hours of the week concerned about this. And that's difficult. And what makes it even more difficult is that sometimes our friends and loved ones aren't very helpful when it comes to this. Because when we do tell them, hey, this is hard, like I'm really struggling and feeling discouraged, then they start, do they start cheerleading you on? Sometimes do they tell you, you can do it, but you're making progress, or they tell you, just try a little harder, just keep going. And although, of course, they mean well, what you learn in peer counseling is that you never want to jump to solutions before first acknowledging what the challenges actually are. And if you're telling someone, this is difficult for me, and then they're just saying, well, you can make it better, what would be more helpful is if they said, this is difficult, this sucks. And I want to take a moment to tell all of you that yes, this does suck. And this is frustrating, and these are unfortunate circumstances. And I hope they get better. And you can do it.
What if your loved one is very negative?
What is what?
What if your loved one is extremely negative? Meaning to say, not giving you even one angstrom of encouragement.
Are they discouraging you?
Yeah.
That's not fair.
But I'm still normal.
Let's talk after this. Yeah, that's not right. Maybe we can spend some time workshopping that in our open mic. Yeah. That's not helpful for the people who do that. If you have loved ones that do that, you can teach them, I want you to be my supporter and my cheerleader. So to continue with that, I think it's important to set realistic expectations for yourself. I would say that the majority of the people that I talk to that start job searching expect that they will find their job within a month at the latest. And I always need to kind of try and help them measure their expectations, because for the people that I know that have found jobs, it doesn't matter how experienced or how incredible they've been, it's taken them on average 6 to 12 months. And that's if they were not working, and that's if they were working, and while they were looking. So what I share that because I know that there are people, I know that we all want to be the exception to the rule, and we all want to, and we all know those people that were able to find roles faster than that. But I hope that by setting more realistic expectations around how long this job search takes will give you more freedom to not beat yourself up for it taking the normal amount of time. So if you've been searching for less than 6 to 12 months and you haven't found a role yet, you're not doing anything wrong. That's how long it takes. And not only is that how long it takes, it's also, I mean, let's say you're still, not there yet. It's still, I know that people want to find their job fast. Let's look at it from the employer's perspective. So they're recruiting for a reason, right? Like that job listing made it up there because that team is overloaded. They're in fact so overloaded that they now have an opening for someone to have 40 hours a week's worth of projects to do. Now think about, a time where you worked on a team that was understaffed, or you were managing a team that was understaffed. How long did it take to get that head count?
Forever.
Yeah. And so for that listing to be up there, they desperately need help because they're so busy. And unfortunately, what that also means is that if we're going to be realistic, there's no way that although of course hiring a person will solve their problems of being overloaded, there's no way that the interview or anything related to recruiting or interviewing will be prioritized above the highest impact action items for the business, which means that anything tied to interviews will always be deprioritized, which means that by nature of them hiring, this is going to be a slow process. So I'll reiterate again that if it takes 6 to 12 months, you're not doing anything wrong. That's just how long it often takes. Now, job searching, as we all know, isn't always fun. And a lot of that, I've realized, comes with guilt over, for me, and for a lot of my friends, it was this kind of feeling like you're not doing enough. And maybe also realizing that it's much more fun to browse than it is to actually apply. And this is where I'd like to ask, does anyone in this room have more than 10 tabs open right now with jobs that they want to apply to? So there's a great Chrome extension called OneTab, which if you download, it'll help you like bookmark all of those in one. It's great. But I realized that that is something that could be structured in a way that can be more productive for you and also give you a part of the job search that you can actually look forward to. So I picked this up in a blog, and this is the way that I would structure my job search. On Tuesdays, I would block out time to look for jobs. And on Thursdays, I would block out time to apply for jobs. So on Tuesdays was when I had 20 tabs open, and I would build out a spreadsheet where I would write the company name, the company role, and then a link to that job posting. And then on Thursday, when I would come in to get started, I would just open up that spreadsheet and then look through those roles again and then go after the ones that actually still seemed interesting to me, and that I would actually want to take the time to customize a letter for. So what this allowed is that if you browse that time on Tuesdays became a lot more enjoyable, and that time on Thursdays became a lot more productive. Another tab that I added onto the spreadsheet and was a list of my favorite brands and companies. And so my first role at Microsoft was underwhelming. My first manager was very unsupportive. And so I spent a year job searching, and I told myself that I was never going to put myself in that type of hurt. I will do my best to not put myself in a situation like that again, that I was going to do the right due diligence, and I was going to find a job where I can do what I love. And so with that, I started thinking about, well, what companies do I love? What companies would I love to work for? And I'm still adding on to this. And so in this spreadsheet, I wrote the name of the company, and I had a link to their jobs page. And so then every now and then, when I go on the spreadsheet, I can just track the jobs postings on those specific companies and be more targeted about, looking out for the teams where I would love to end up in. Now, going back to that, 80% time spent feeling a bit angsty, it's important to give yourself room to still have fun and have hobbies. I know that it feels like you want to spend every minute in being productive. What can oftentimes make you feel more productive and more confident is if you actually find a way to have fun. have fun in the way before you were job searching. Now this is easier to say than to do, so, and I'm sure it's something you've heard before, so I'll move on from that. The next part is...
Question. So, going back to that previous slide,
Mm-hmm.
is that what you mean when you say find your mojo?
Your mojo. Yeah.
Something that's not work related?
Yeah.
So in short, you've got to have a very, very good hobby.
Yeah, and something that you feel like you're good at
Yeah.
in there.
If your hobby somehow coincide with your work, that would be great.
It would be better if it wasn't.
Really?
Yeah, so that it could still be fun for you. It's like I used to read Psychology Today for fun when I was doing marketing at Microsoft. And now when I read Psychology Today, I'm more, I feel like I need to tweet every article. Like, it's, you want something something like improv, something like running, like something that, like sports, because those are the things that will balance out. It's like you want to have something that you can win in during the week, regardless of what is going on with your job search.
What are the criteria, some of the criteria, can you give us an example of what you would use when you build your target company? Because from the outside, a lot of the companies here look really great for us, but I know people who work there who quit because there's no work-life balance and it's not so good from the inside.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the criteria you use?
I'm really glad you asked that, because that is my last slide, is talking about defining our criteria. Yeah, I think it's, and I can share with you what mine was. So the next part that I want to mention, and that's, I'm sure that a lot of you, once you're done job searching, you probably don't want to have anything to do with it for a long while. And so I just wanted to urge you to maybe reconsider that, and once you find your role, to keep your job alerts and just check on them every now and then. We had a director at Microsoft that recommended that we all that we should always be searching, and that he goes and interviews at least once a year, even if he's not really interested in leaving, but that is essentially a forcing function for him to keep his interview skills fresh and his resume up to date. So then that way, if anything happens, it's not like I haven't interviewed for 5 years, like my resume, I don't even know what to add on to it anymore. It's also a great way to look at those job postings to remind yourself that there are always other options out there. Like when I have a shitty day, I go and look at my jobs alerts. And sometimes it actually cheers me up, because I'm like, what I'm doing I actually like more than anything listed here. But other times, I see things that, I know what my friends are looking for, right? And I know what our clients are looking for. And so as I'm looking at these job alerts, I see roles that would be great for those people. And so I'll just quickly forward them along. And that, it's surprising how many people have actually landed roles that sent over that way. And even though you've done barely anything, right? But you helped someone that you care about land a dream job, right? Like they passively got to receive something that is personally matched for them based on what they're looking for. Now, things like that are a great way to keep in touch, and they're also a great way to network. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a sec. There are also, these job postings are, for anyone that kind of geeks out about company strategy, it is a really interesting way to see what's coming up for companies. So, for example, if you look on Amazon's jobs board, it's like you can see the types of initiatives that are coming out that they're not necessarily publishing in the news, but they're definitely recruiting for. So it's a cool way to kind of find out stuff that that you might not have been privy to otherwise. But going back to the networking part, and so raise your hand if networking is part of the strategy that you're using for your job search. Okay, great. So are you guys going to meetups or events?
Yep.
Yeah, that's okay, cool. So something that I think is unfortunate about networking is that it has pretty negative connotations. I think in a lot of ways it sounds like a dirty word because it makes me think of people that aren't genuine, that are really kind of overly strategic, and that they are looking at it as essentially a stepping stone to what they want, or a tit for tat kind of thing. And I think that those negative connotations are what oftentimes scare people off about networking, is because they don't want to do those things. They want to be able to be authentic. And what I wish is that more people knew that the best type of networking is really just like making new friends. My favorite, one of my mantras, I would say, is make friends, not contacts. And what this means is that when you're at these events, so what would a networker do at one of these events, right? Maybe they'll look at the guest list and see which of these people are most important, or relevant to what they're looking for. And then they'll come to the event and then find those people, come up, give them their elevator pitch, hand their business, do the business card exchange, and then move on to make sure they reach everyone. Now, maybe that's a little extreme or not. There's some elements of that can be really effective if they're done well. But those people also, I find, get a little stressed when the conversation gets a little long. I don't know if you've seen that. You're talking to someone and you just know their eyes are like in that picture. You see some people who are just looking around the room, or just kind of waiting to move on to the next person. Now, I really encourage you to reconsider the way that you approach networking at those events and look at it as a goal to have more quality conversations rather than more of them, right? It's more about the quality of the conversation than the quantity of them. Because after the event, what'll happen is that you have a stack of business cards, and you're going to reach back out to the person who you managed to have a comfortable, meaningful, relaxed conversation with, by the bar. That's the person you're going to want to follow up with and catch up with and kind of check in and maybe grab coffee with, versus the person that did a drive-by with a 30-second pitch on their card. And so if you find yourself at an event where you've only talked to maybe one or two people, but it was great conversation, that's great. I've had that so many times, and I'm still keeping in touch with those people. And it's been years. That is real networking, I would say. But of course, you also don't really want to be, the clinger, right? You don't want to just be standing, you found one person, you're like, all right, we're gonna have a really quality conversation. So I found that it makes it easier if I have some kind of polite one-liners to move on, to be able to, say, hey, it was really nice talking to you, I'm gonna go do this now, but not be rude. And so what I found is that if I say that I need to go somewhere else, I'm gonna go get a drink, I'm gonna go to the restroom, I'm gonna go check out the other room, I'm gonna go find my friend, I'm gonna go talk to this person about that. It was really nice talking to you. I hope we can keep in touch. Here's my business card. I hope we can go to another meetup sometime, etc. But that is a completely fine and polite and nice way to move on, talk to someone else, but also still maintain this positive feeling and potential new connection for you. Now, although it is great to make friends, not contacts, I think it is important to be careful who you share your insecurities with. And I don't know if someone's been burned like this before, but I definitely have. Where, a friend that was on my team, I was managing a project, and we had a terrible meeting where this dev started going rogue, and afterwards I turned to this who I thought was a friend on my team and told her about all of these things I was worried about was going to happen now that this meeting went that way. And of course everything was fine, my manager was on the call, we worked it all out, etc. But 6 months later, we get our reviews, and I had written this same person a review this long, this positive, about all of the things how amazing I thought she was. She said all of those things that I told her I was worried about in my review, though. All of those things that I said I was concerned about having happened, she was like, I don't know, it was something that was like, that the team wouldn't be as involved, or, think that I can drive this or whatever. She used those words against me. It was like she kept it in her pocket, and then 6 months later pulled it out to try it. And that's because Microsoft had a terrible stack ranking system at the time where you couldn't be successful without being more successful than others. So your success made you a target, unfortunately. So I share that story because as you're meeting new people, and this is a vulnerable time, you may feel like you want to tell them I'm worried about all these things. I'm worried about coming off stupid. I'm worried that I've been looking for too long. I'm worried, etc. Whatever you're concerned here, that might not be helping you as much in these certain scenarios. And that's because, our friends, if we think about the way our friends see us, right? They might know these insecurities about us, but they also have all of this other information. They've seen us be successful in a million other ways, and so they'll hear our insecurities and then kind of cancel them out themselves and then, cheerlead you, right? But for someone that you just met, what else are they gonna go off of? If you're only telling them, this is how much information they know, and half of that information were things you were worried about, and they don't know yet that you're just humble and modest and self-critical, which are great qualities. But this is the time when you're making friends, not contacts, to really introduce yourself in the way that your friends see you. And of course, if only we saw ourselves the way our friends saw us, right? Just think we would all be much happier and more confident people. So try and portray yourself in that way. And I know that this is difficult also, especially for women, for anyone that's read Lean In, but I've also actually seen this come up for many men too, which is that we assume that if we do a good job, all we need to do is just do a good job. And then someone's gonna put a tiara or a crown on our heads and say, good job, here's a wand, whatever. But that's actually not gonna happen. We have to advocate for ourselves. If we want that tiara, we need to tell people what we're working on and what we're capable of, how our friends see us. Now, on that note, I think it's also important to make it easier for people to help you. Now, I know that I'm sure that there have been people in your life that have told you that they will do something for you. And maybe you are awkwardly kind of waiting for them to follow through on that. Is anyone in that kind of limbo right now? Yeah? So,
I have a question. I think that's a loaded question. You expect people to help you. I think we should put an expectation that I will get no help whatsoever.
I think people want to help.
And
If
when the
you,
help comes, it's like icing on the cake. I think if we had that expectation, then we would feel good.
I think you raise a great point in that we're always going to be able to help ourselves more than others. And we shouldn't wait to, and this is difficult because people always say they want to help, right? And then you're like, okay, so you're going to take care of this for me? Great. But that's not how it works. What I will say is that if you make it easy for someone to help you, it will be way more likely that they will follow through. Because if you, let's look at it like this. You met this person at an event, they know someone that works at this company that you want to work for. Now, they said that they would refer you on, and they already have your resume because you guys are friends and they've had it in the past. So what they would need to do in that situation is remember that they promised that. Draft up an email, attach the resume, maybe even look up your LinkedIn and include that in there. Now, those are, 4 to 5 steps that, who hasn't done that for their friends, right? But if you draft an email for them and you write it in the way of that, you're writing it to them, but you're really writing it to whoever they're sending it to afterwards. All they need to do then is press forward, write 2 lines, say, hey, please see this candidate, they're great. And that's something I don't think it takes more than common sense that is more likely to convert, to use marketing terms, than the other way. The other part is that I think a lot of people feel like they're being flexible and open-minded by saying, I'm open to whatever opportunities, especially when, of course, the people who want to help, the connectors in your life, right? Like, oh, I know this person, I'll introduce you, I know this person. What makes it a bit difficult when people are, open to all types of different opportunities is that as the person is essentially trying to scan through their, internal address book, you're not giving them keywords to query, right? If you tell them even just some buzzwords, like a consumer company, it doesn't have to be specific, but just buzzwords like that help bucket it, even just narrower than everything, right? Consumer, marketing, HR, ops, you can even give them 5 different buzzwords that are completely different because maybe you're considering different roles. But either way, those buzzwords will help trigger their memory. And that will make it easier for them to help you than if they're just like, oh, okay, well, I'll try and think of something, So another thing is, a lot of my job in marketing has been tied to email, and my work is essentially in a lot of ways in my inbox, and I can't tell you how many emails I've gotten just ridiculous times later, like months later, weeks later, whatever. And they'll say, oh, I'm so sorry, I was tied up with this, or I'm sorry, it was crazy with blah. And then they just continue on. And that's fine, we just pick it up from there and keep going. And I think at first I would get really wound up. And a lot of you have been in the workforce for so long, maybe some of you have gone past this. But I've found that it took me a while to realize that it's not personal, it's email. And there are a lot of people that are just bad on email. Like, it's like when you get them in a room or you run into them or whatever, or you just, with the people that you work with, that they're better over chat or they're better over the phone or whatever. And so keeping that in mind, I think, is important in that it is completely fine to then follow up. And I love the people that would follow up because sometimes you do just miss it and it's not intentional, and I'm sure that's happened to everyone here. But what's important is that when you do follow up, it's not, a guilt trip. And it's not like, hey, this is the third email I've sent you, so just checking in on what you're doing, you know. But really, you know, I'll tell you two stories to consider. So there's a talk by Y Combinator from the founder of Box, and he showed a typical sales cycle for them working with an enterprise customer that was very interested in using Box, like very interested. There were like 8 emails with like probably 4 or 5, like between every like second or third email, the person wouldn't respond. And so they train their sales team to keep following up and to assume that even for the person who's like, yes, we're gonna buy this product, it's gonna take potentially 8 emails to actually get them on a call to implement it. Another story is there was a panel where an exec from Microsoft Advertising was talking about how she screened emails from people she didn't know. And she said that she would actually wait to see if they would follow up before she would respond. Because she realized that, you know what, I don't have enough time to respond to every email in my inbox. And if this was important enough to this person, then they would follow up. So I always think about that, because of course I get, you know, my own insecurities, like, well, maybe they didn't respond because they didn't want to, you know, like because they thought my idea was stupid or my resume wasn't worth it. But I always think about that example and I'm like, you know what, this is important to me and I'm gonna follow up. This is how I'm showing this person that this matters to me. And so my favorite line that I use for that is just bumping this up in your inbox. Any update on XYZ, and that'll just be, you know, you write, like, I kind of write long emails, so, but let's say I have my question at the end. So when I bump the email, then I'll just have the question. And of course they'll be like, what are you talking about? And then that will encourage them to actually read the email that maybe they had missed before. These are the games I learned at Microsoft. The next part is as you're interviewing, and so I'm sure you guys have realized this already, in that people oftentimes don't tell you what's really going on with the team when you're interviewing. And so they will tell you what you want to hear, that it's a great culture and everyone's so passionate and collaborative. But that might not be the case. And so I used to think that just asking those questions was enough. And it's like, I asked the question, I got the answer I wanted, yes, you know, this is gonna work. But what I realized is that it could be completely the opposite. And I wish that I realized earlier that it's important to pick up on the subtleties. Like, is this company's culture to love the company? Like, there are some startups especially, right, where everyone's like rah about it. If something's wrong in that company, no one can talk about it because everyone in the company loves the company, right? And so what you'll find is people being like, you're asking them how they like it, and they'll be like, I love it. I love it. You know, their eyes are this big. Like, if you see that, that's a sign. Something else that I found has helped me pick up on this kind of stuff is trying to gauge how the team is actually incentivized. So that is a question that they won't be able to not answer in a real way. And if that answer turns out to be one that clearly pits the team against each other, you know, it clearly, like Amazon, for example, the way that that I had this question answered before was that they were incentivized to back up their stories with data. So you weren't supposed to raise ideas or feedback without having data to back it up. And it was incentivized for people to always get to the truth of the data, which meant that in meetings there, I don't mean to trash on Amazon, but I lived in Seattle for 4 years and had a lot of friends that would just get bullied in these things, because the point was to find the truth in the data and whether there were lies there. So try and read between the lines of, the answers to questions like that, and try and find out what it is that the employees are incentivized to do, because people by nature want to do a good job, right? They don't want to lose their job. They want to do what the company cares about. And so although we may think that, oh, well, I heard that the culture isn't great, but my direct team will be fine, or this person will be fine, you can't change culture. Culture sets the tone for what success looks like. And if success looks like competition, collaboration, debate, for some people that works, but for people like me, that doesn't work. And on that note, something else that's extremely important is the importance of a good manager. And that's because if you've heard this quote of that people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. If your manager is terrible, how are you going to get promoted? How are you going to get recognized and rewarded and appreciated for your work? And so if your manager sucks, okay, so do you want to be job searching again in 6 months? Because that is what will likely happen. And so I think part of the interviewing process is also making sure that you know who is going to be writing your review. And what I also realized is, so there's a common cognitive distortion, which is black or white thinking, right? So it's either there's good managers and there's bad managers. But what I learned is that there are also okay managers. And if you have an okay manager, then you're gonna have an okay year in terms of your review, And why? It's because an okay manager is not going to go above and beyond to advocate for you or for the team. They're not going to get the resources or the visibility that's needed for the team to really reach its full potential. And if you're doing great work and you're working harder than that okay manager is, then they might not like that. Like that might make them look bad. And you might resent them because it sucks to be working harder than your manager. And so if you have an okay manager, I think in some ways it may actually be better to just, be okay yourself. Have an okay year. Not every year is gonna be the one where you're gonna blow, not every year is about your career. Sometimes there's other things that are more important in your life. And so it might actually be nice to have an okay manager who isn't, putting this high pressure on you. So that's if it's an okay manager, are you okay with that? You could be okay with that. The other way to figure that out is typically after you get your offer, that is a great time to really get the truth. Because at this point, or at least closer to the truth than you've been getting. Because as a candidate, they're trying to woo you. But as someone that's been given an offer, you're kind of already part of the team. And so you can ask to go and get some coffee or have a call with someone that reports to your manager. I've asked every time. And I've been saved, because you go get coffee outside of the office and the truth comes out. It turns out this person's actually planning on leaving, and out of the goodness of their heart, they actually hinted it to me somehow that I had to, of course, read between the lines, because what if that comes back to the manager? But do that. Or you can, job search again in 6 months if you want. And to round that out, I think what's extremely important is realizing that everyone has different things that they're trying to get out of a job. And whatever those things are, I think it's important to turn them into a real checklist, like real criteria, how we talked about earlier. It makes me sad to see people settling for roles that don't meet that criteria, because it just seems like a temporary Band-Aid, and that wound is just gonna, a temporary Band-Aid with no ointment on it to actually heal what was wrong with the last position. That's my theory. So I think that by setting that list, it not only helps you shoot for what will be a better position than your last one, it also gives you those keywords that you can then throw around to people so that they can better connect you. But it also gives you the opportunity to actually run towards something than away from it. You know, if you're going through your interview and you have this checklist in mind, and then at some point through the interview process you realize, you know what, this role meets 5 out of 5, then you're gonna accept that and you're gonna feel like you got your dream job. If you're interviewing and it turns out that it's missing 2 out of 5 of that criteria, then you'll know that and you'll come into that recognizing that these are the trade-offs that I'm making. It'll help make the decision-making process one that's more about where are you going, you know, and not like I just can't do this anymore. I need to get away from this, because that's just a short-term fix. So I'd love to hear what some of your criteria is for your roles, and then I can share mine after that if you're interested. Mm-hmm.
Mine is who I'm interviewing with, seeing if that's going to be the person I'm working for, that I do have like a quick connection and I feel positive about the person, because I did just leave someone that I had a horrible manager to describe it perfectly. So that is like almost number 1 on my list, more so than the company even,
Mm-hmm.
the person.
Yes, yeah, having a great manager is so important. That was definitely one of my criteria as well. Is that anyone else's criteria? Is that something that, nice. What else?
I think that is a very difficult thing, because typically the managers who's going to hire you can mask that very well. I noticed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to investigate.
Very encouraging, very supportive, but by the time you're in, all hell breaks loose.
Right.
Mm-hmm. We're having coffee with the potential colleague before you take it off. It sounds like a great idea. So for me, working on something that matters. I mean, I'm in software, and I'd like to work on a product that can make a difference in the world.
Yeah. What about you?
For me, one of my previous jobs, I interviewed the manager at Abdilova, and he was great. But the problem with this, you know, the organizations that I worked for, they're constantly ebbing and flowing. You're going to reorg, you're managers, and so it's not really a great longer term path. So you kind of have to look who else is surrounding, because you might get reorged into another organization, and my gosh, that's the manager from
Culture.
That is a really good point. So to consider not only who your manager might be when you first start, but also to look at their peer managers, because those might be your managers in 6 months. Microsoft would get reorged all the time also.
I think bigger companies do it. And it's company culture, right? You have to kind of learn about the company culture, not just the team culture.
Yes. And that's, I think, my theory is that some, you know, MBAs at the top, that they just have fun with that stuff. It's like, oh, we can design business, like that's their way of doing business strategy, is through designing the right org chart. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was nodding, Amy, because, the job I just had, so much changed after the interview. The project changed, the manager that hired me was laid off, and so I completely agree with you. And in fact, earlier this year I interviewed with Vox, and guess what? I loved it. One of my criteria is location. south
Mm.
of San Jose. I can't do the financial district, and I can barely do Redwood City and San Mateo, quite honestly.
Mm.
So Santa Clara County and Fremont, I hope.
Mhm.
Guess what? Fox is moving to San Mateo. So I interviewed in Mountain View, and we were all like, yay, and then they were like boxing, no pun intended, to move to San Mateo.
Mm.
So I actually disagree with you about really, I think identifying the criteria is good,
Mhm.
but holding fast to them may not be the best idea. Amy's idea
Mhm.
is a little bit stronger for me.
Yeah, being flexible.
Look at the bigger picture, because your boss could get laid off, the company can move. You have to be in alignment with your favorite company, where they're heading, and uncover strategy and direction so that you're part of the mix of success, and be open to the fact your project could change, you can get a bad review, all kinds of things. I mean, the only thing that's constant is that it does change. You have to be
Mhm.
open to that that's what's gonna happen, and Amy's strategy is really good, is look at the bigger picture. Who's your
Mhm.
boss's boss? Ask for an interview with your boss's boss to see how your boss is being managed. It's not
Mhm.
about them interviewing me. I actually ask for additional interviews with the people I wanna talk with.
That's really good advice. Does I'd like to open it up to any other tips, because I've run through some here, but I want to learn from other people here in the group. What are some ways that you have managed your psychology through this job search?
I actually have a question
Mhm.
regarding your previous point
Oh,
about
sure.
day management.
Mhm.
So for somebody who's been out of work for a long time, can we afford to make that kind of criteria and stick to it and not be more flexible and say, let me just take on something because just to have it on my resume, and then eventually start looking for something more permanent? Just, or do you think it's
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and the question is whether in some circumstances, maybe if you want to put some job experience on your resume sooner than later, kind of whatever it may be. I think that that's fair. I think that I got this advice from my brother-in-law, in when you're looking for a job, to look at it, to actually be considering what job you want after that job. And so if you're thinking about what job you want after that job, then you know that whatever job you're getting in the short term is a stepping stone to that. So yes, I think it's, and in the year that I mentioned that I was job searching, I had taken a short-term role. So it was basically, I moved to a sister team that was doing the same underwhelming stuff, but I had a better manager. So that helped give me more confidence to be able to actually go through the interviews, and also gave me more time to be more selective. And through that process, I turned down 4 offers before I went with the one that met all 5 out of 5. Mm-hmm.
So in terms of goals, one thing I'm always looking for is an opportunity to make positive change and be appreciated for that and rewarded for it,
Mm-hmm.
lead to further opportunities. As far as tips, just as in networking, always try to be of service first. Try to offer somebody else something.
Mm-hmm.
It'll come back to you some way at some time. Don't get caught up in tit for tat.
Yeah.
And get as many informationals as you can, because that's how you're going to get a read on the culture. Take them from anybody working in the organization, and ask questions that are different of the people who aren't in the department that you're going to be working in. Such things as, tell me about what people do in their free time, or tell me, about how you see compensation from this receptionist position, or whatever it is that you see. So
Mm-hmm.
don't go just within the department, because it might be a different department before too long, like they say.
Yeah, and how they treat other departments will reflect on the company culture.
Absolutely.
It's like there's a company called Zulily in Seattle that their Glassdoor reviews are some of the worst I have ever seen. And I brought it up in my interview as a question, and the guy was like, "Oh, well, that's not the marketing department. That's like the warehouse people. So you wouldn't have that issue." And it's like, And it wasn't just warehouse issues that were written on that glass door, you know.
Going
Mhm.
back to your slide, and I would say, for me, what's really important is you need to have what your deal breakers are. So you might have
Yes.
top criteria, but you
Mhm.
could be flexible in some of that, but there are going to be some things like deal breakers. So for me, if culture is really important to you, culture is all around you. The minute you walk into an office, you can sense what that culture is going to be like. Is it transparent? Is it open? Is it fun? Is it not? Is it stuffy? Is the C-suite behind closed doors, being
Mhm.
monitored by the admins? Or, so there's so many things as you're just even walking into the building that you can really observe. But
Mhm.
I think it's so important to have your own boundaries and know what your showstoppers are.
Yeah. Any deal breakers? Does that? Mhm.
Yes, the boss who may appear to be really awesome, but is really a soul-sucking psychopath. Narcissist.
Mhm.
That's the kind of
Sociopaths and narcissists. They are drawn to executive positions in corporate America and in startups. Has anyone here worked for a narcissist or a sociopath?
Oh yeah.
That is too many. That's too many hands. That stuff.
Many of them
Yeah.
are very good at hiding.
Yeah.
That's part of the dysfunction is their ability to hide.
Yes. And it's not treatable. That's what it's literally. It's the most severe personality disorders. There's 4: antisocial personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. Then schizophrenia is on that too. Those are the 3 that you just need to get away from those people. That's what I would recommend. That's what I'll save you. Go read some blogs. They'll all kind of end with that. Mhm.
Question following that, I read an article that most people going for those positions and being hired are narcissistic criteria. So what are your recommendations to deal with this?
Find a new job. I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you read Psychology Today regularly.
Mhm.
So would it be like a training ground for people that really want to succeed? Because I need a job. So if the social path is going to give me a job, I need that job. But I need to come up with something to survive in that job and move on. Because I cannot be running from everything like that. So my question is Psychology Today, is it equipped with, that regular, facts and how to build and be successful in corporate America today? Because people like me, we find it difficult that, you need to survive, so what
You
would
know,
say we should do?
it sounds like you're asking where is there some advice on how to do better in those environments, and I really like themuse.com. Themuse.com. They also have an amazing. It's called if you search the Muse all-in-one interview prep guide. That's what I always use before interviews. It just gives you. I think it's 6 boxes with top 3 kind of bullet points for each one of these questions, and it's good. But they have really good advice on there, and how do you leave a job gracefully? How do you deal with an irritating coworker, or things like that.
Can you use all-in-one interview guide?
All-in-one interview prep guide. Mhm. Yeah.
A couple more questions?
Sure.
Just another
Oh, sorry.
deal breaker, unethical behavior,
Yes. Yes.
compromised morals.
Mhm.
About looking at job descriptions and coming across that you may have to work with ambiguity, would that be a red flag?
That's like Microsoft's. They have these 6 competencies that's how your success is measured, and one of them is how well you deal with ambiguity. So no, I don't think that's a red flag necessarily. I think that's more of what we were talking about earlier about that. It's what's constant in corporate America is change.
I think that one depends on the person. Okay, we gotta quit here. So thank you, Lisa.
Sure.
And,
Thank you.
yeah, you have a
few minutes to talk to people if they want to.
Cool.
And she'll be up here, and if you want to come and talk to her individually, feel free. But anyway, go out and have a great day, and see you later.
Oh.